Back in 2006, I was a proud card-carrying member of the Blockbuster Game Pass, where you could rent games and keep them as long as you'd like and swap them out for new games as often as you'd liked for like $15 a month, and what a time that was. Black was one of those games that I held onto for weeks and weeks because of how much fun it was to play. It was hard to think of spending that much time on a linear first-person shooter with little replayability and no multiplayer, but Black was such a monumental title when it came out, there was truly nothing like it. It was the most visceral shooter game that I've ever played. The guns felt heavy and powerful, the sounds were mind-blowing, and the destruction, my god, it was magnificent. It was like playing a game manufactured out of a Hollywood movie set. It may not look like much in the footage captured here today compared to dozens of more modern shooters that have built on and reshaped the genre, but back when this shit dropped, there was nothing on its level. Coming out in 2006 on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, this game was released in the same year as the next generation of consoles with the Xbox 360. But this title did not make it onto that system. But for poor people like me who wouldn't get the 360 for a couple more years, Black looked like a 360 game on these older consoles. I mean, hell, it looked better than some launch titles on the 360. With the fantastic textures on nearly everything but especially the guns, and the destructible environments and with the particle effects, I'd be hard pressed to find a game on the PlayStation 2 or Xbox that I can definitively say looks better than Black. Just another reason that this game blew my mind back in the day. So what was the purpose of Black? The answer is pure, unadulterated fun, and it was a statement from passionate developers. Criterion had three basic principles when it came to the development of Black. They wanted players to be able to have fun with nothing but an empty room, they wanted the guns to be the main characters of every scene, and they wanted Black to revitalize the shooting genre, similar to how Burnout revitalized the racing genre. They focused less on what other shooters have done and more on over-the-top action films from Hollywood. The bombastic explosions and destruction of environments and the dramatic acting one does when getting riddled with bullets. Movies like Die Hard, The Matrix, and True Lies all had these things front and center. And Black wanted to make a game that mirrored these action marvels, rather than just copy the status quo of FPS games. Other shooters had character models that simply fell over after getting shot. Black wanted their characters to dance or flip dramatically when being shot at. Other shooters had level designs that felt like an afterthought. Black designed the progress of their game around level design, making sure each turn that you took was a set piece with the ways that enemies interacted within it or how it could be destroyed with bullets or explosions. Every shootout left concrete walls chipped and destroyed, dust filling the air so thickly that you couldn't even see enemies to shoot them anymore, and sparks from ricochet of bullets and shell casings flying everywhere. Black was trying its hardest to be different, and it's straight up just not like the other girls. The opening level was a testament to their first principle. The player starts with nothing but an empty room and, a shotgun. Blasting open the door with the Spaz 12 is not only something you can do, it's a goddamn instruction. And before you do that, why not riddle the rest of the room and go crazy? The guns themselves are beautiful, the textures and modeling were immaculate, and Criterion wanted to treat the guns like cars were treated in Burnout, the main character in the action movie. They aren't accurate to their real life counterparts, like the AK's charging handle being on the wrong side, or the Uzi having a side mounted charging handle as well as the original top mounted one, and let's not even get into the magazine counts on some of these guns. But this game wasn't going for realistic, it was going for Hollywood movie. And what better way to do that than to have gun inaccuracies? With that being said though, the guns were always front and center, and if it wasn't made clear that this game was gun porn from the menu animations, then the reloading in the game should have cemented it in for you. The rest of the world blurs as you raise your weapon system and reload, a connecting moment to you and your partner. This is your rifle, this is your best friend. Without it, you are useless, and with it, you can kill all the scumbags you need in order to eat all the crayons for yourself. In combination with the beautiful sights of the game, Criterion put a lot of thought into the sound of the gunfights. It's not as simple as the sound effects being really good because, they are. They're punchy and over the top, harkening back on those Hollywood shootouts. Some gun sounds even being based on specific movie sounds, like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Uzi in True Lies, or Bruce Willis's MP5 in Die Hard. But it's even more than that. The concept that they used for sound design was called the choir of guns. Not every gun sound is just copy and pasted to every gun firing in the area, but instead, if there are 3 enemies firing, for example, one would have a low note, one would have a mid note, and one a high note, creating a variance in sounds and creating, well, a choir of guns. And in combination with the environmental destruction and various explosions going off, the sounds in this game are just amazing. The gameplay loop of Black is as straightforward as it gets. Get into an area and kill everyone not waving your flag. The levels are all linear and mission structured, involving clearing a certain area before blowing up something and moving on to the next. Black doesn't have the largest selection of weapons in comparison to most shooters, but it varies the tempo quite nicely in each mission by giving you a starting weapon to use appropriate for the mission at hand, like a Glock with a suppressor or a sniper rifle, before picking up a trusty AK-47 or a shotgun and spraying bullets at everyone as usual in every level. You can only hold 2 weapons at a time, which isn't really a massive limitation, as more niche weapons aren't really as useful as just grabbing something automatic to spray and pray. There are standout weapons that feel really good to use, but sometimes they aren't available to pick up as much as you would like. Most notably the Magnum pistol that packs a serious punch and is tons of fun to use as it kills most enemies in a single shot. And on that note, that single shot aspect is a big deal, as one of the biggest criticisms this game had is the bullet sponge enemies. Every foot soldier working for the 7th wave is either stacked with level 3 plates, or the game just has to give you a reason for the ridiculous mag capacity on every gun. But either way, it gets really annoying at times when enemies take dozens of 7.62 rounds to the chest and can still fire back at you. Other than mindless killing, there are some side objectives to do in each level, simple interactable objects that don't break the pace too much, like collecting intelligence documents or destroying something in the environment. Doing these aren't required unless you're playing on the hardest difficulty, but if you do choose to check them off your list, you are awarded with silver weapons, which have infinite bullets, as well as the 40mm grenade launcher attachment for the M16 that becomes your new starter weapon, and it's just as magnificent as it sounds.
That's a lot of damage! That's a lot of damage!
When your health drops to a certain level, the screen turns black and white and the game slows down, with all the ambient noise of battle dialing down and the sound of your heartbeat takes over. The large and small vibration motors in the controllers reflect the systolic and diastolic part of the heartbeat, a cool touch to make the already cinematic game feel that much more amazing. All in all, there isn't much too complex when it comes to the gameplay. It's a shining star of portraying simplicity is king. When the game looks and sounds as good as it does, you don't really need any bells and whistles. Just let the players enjoy the game. Give them an empty room and a Spaz 12 shotgun. The story of Black is pretty underwhelming and was an afterthought to literally everything else in the game. I mean, really, Criterion focused on literally everything else and sort of pieced together some sort of overarching plot to drive the missions forward, for some semblance of a purpose in the game. The only thing that they knew is that they didn't want the game to take place in a World War II setting, something pretty overplayed in shooter games at the time, and the slow-paced guns of that era didn't really fit the Fast and Furious gameplay that they were going for. They also didn't want to go to the Middle East reflecting more modern combat scenarios. They instead decided to go to Russia, because the main premise to the game is shown to you in some live action cutscenes taking place in some dark and dingy interrogation room. One of the longest unskippable cutscenes to the intro of an FPS game ever. The main character, Sergeant First Class Jack Keller, a CIA Black Ops operator, is being interrogated by some unnamed, presumably higher ranking member of the CIA about his actions that took place several days prior when battling an arms smuggling terrorist organization called the 7th Wave. Keller broke plenty of direct orders on his mission, so he's in pretty hot water, and he needs to dish out all the information that he knows about this 7th wave or face declassification and prison for life. When attacking a 7th wave stronghold 4 days prior, Keller ambushed a terrorist-controlled building against orders, and ended up getting ambushed by a hitman inside. However, this hitman doesn't kill Keller. He speaks to him, revealing to him that he is American, but Keller forgets what he says because an RPG hits the building, causing some convenient amnesia. It isn't revealed now, but this hitman is the leader of the 7th wave, and his name is William Lennox, a former CIA wet work operative who faked his death and started this terrorist organization. Keller continues on to take down high-ranking members of the 7th wave and destroy various resources that they have in the area, like an arms factory and an iron foundry. After a whole team was killed in an ambush at a boatyard, the operation was officially terminated by the CIA. But Keller didn't want to quit. He and the rest of his squad pursued Lennox to his compound and blew it up, presumably killing Lennox in the explosion. So Keller again disobeys direct orders and does what he wants. Back in the interrogation room, the interrogator reveals to Keller that they knew of Lennox's involvement with the 7th wave the whole time. And not only that, they put Keller on the mission because of his hot-headed nature, and they had assumed that he would disobey orders and pursue Lennox by any means necessary. And in a third big reveal, they reveal that Lennox is actually not dead, and they want Keller to continue his pursuit of him and take him down for good. They have arranged a fake death for Keller, taking him off of Lennox's radar, and the game ends with the interrogator telling Keller to get ready for his next mission. A cliffhanger of sorts, I guess. But again, no one actually cared about the story in this game. Not even the developers. It was half-baked and a second thought to everything. But it was serviceable to the game and it pushed the plot forward. Unfortunately, not everything is perfect when it comes to Black, especially in retrospect. The game is short, it only takes about 5 or 6 hours to beat, and there's little actual reason to replay this game unless you want to go again on harder difficulties. But doing so doesn't really give you anything cool as far as unlockables. And also, the game's lack of multiplayer bit it in the butt when it comes to the amount of time that players spent, well, playing the game. But like I said at the beginning, I had this game for weeks myself, and I had tons of fun just playing the game back to back, but I can totally understand that most people didn't do that with this game. It's more likely that most people played the game once or twice, putting 10 to 12 hours max into it, and then never picking the game up again. This is bad for developers, but there's also a silver lining to that when you think about how fondly this game is remembered for what is theoretically pretty slim time spent with it. So that means something, I guess. The quality over quantity, and you know, all that jazz. Ultimately, the game was received pretty well, and it sold really well also, even being released on the tail end of the 6th generation of gaming. But even with that, the game was never renewed for a sequel, even though Criterion had one in the works. But it's not too far-fetched to think that EA, the publisher for this game, did not want to dump more money into that. They already had plenty of FPS games on their roster, like Medal of Honor and Battlefield. Why create competition for themselves, when Criterion could better spend their time doing what they excelled at thus far, creating unique racing experiences with Burnout? So we never officially get a Black sequel from Criterion and EA, but co-creator and designer of Black, Stuart Black, and a bunch of developers that worked on the game did migrate over to Codemasters a few years later, another studio known primarily for racing titles oddly enough, and made a spiritual successor to Black, named Body Count, in 2011. Unfortunately, that title didn't really do fantastic. I don't know if they used the same template that they had for Black 2, a game that theoretically would have worked in 2005, and tried to release it in 2011 when shooters have far advanced in quality and scope, or it just wasn't a great game in general. But that game did flop either way. Maybe I'll talk about that one on the channel soon. Black was a one and done game, and it has a fond place in my heart. I still think it's the best 6th generation shooter to come out when 7th gen shooters were starting to take over, but it is honestly more fun left in nostalgic memories than it is to go back and actually play it. What made the game so special and unique back then is washed out in retrospect by many games that have just done better at this point. That doesn't take away from what Black did in the time that it came out. I still think that game was just magical. It was unlike anything when it was released, but all that stuff kind of loses its luster when you look at it in retrospect. Because every game that comes out these days does what Black did. It's not really unheard of, it is more the norm now in gaming. So it's hard to go back and play the game now and be blown away by what it presents. Instead, it feels kind of more stale, to be honest, and it's one of the more lackluster games to go back and play. I guess that's the curse of being too innovative. Everyone copies you, so what you did originally turns out not to be so special, 20 years later. With that being said though, allow me to shout out my patrons and YouTube members for holding it down. Doc Schwinn, Kid Kingpin, Snowflake, Zachary Parkerson, Not Much, Anonymous Starkweather, Crash Bandicoot 25, Ben Stevens, Potty, Yay Man, Alfred Correa, Kenneth Butler, Ethan Carpenter, Matthew Taylor, Scribe Slendy, Nick the Brosa, Nico Mendez, Dylan Klink, Frankie Hammer, Peanut So Holland, Grizzly Wizzly, Sexy Pickles, Shotgun Minister, and Forge'em Nas. As always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Peace.